the weekend we left, but
Right. Did you see that?
a lot of the public. Are you able to do what you need to do now, Bob?
I'm going to just sit down. I want to see here. Hold on a second. I wanted to. There we go. Pause.
Mike, I serve as the chief scientist of Cell and Human Performance Wing at AFRL, and I also lead the AFRL biotech portfolio. This is the second of our $3 million challenge. We have three $1 million biotech challenges. This is the second that the Air Force Research Laboratory is sponsoring. One of the reasons for this is that we recognize the potential that exists in the biotech area and feel this is the time to step up and push some capabilities towards Air Force and DoD needs. As you're all aware, biotech is advancing at a rapid pace in several sectors, and you know, the unfortunate pandemic has really shown you know, how the biotech ecosystem, you know, is rapidly responding to this current crisis in order to provide solutions that's coming from academia, from industry, non-traditionals. Through this biotech challenges, we are seeking to partner with the best solution provider to address specific Air Force challenges where biotechnology can provide unique solutions and open up opportunities to build relationships with those partners that are willing to work with us and build capabilities that can support the national interests of the United States. You know, we're here today to answer any questions you might have about the processes, the players, and the problem itself. You're going to hear in a little while a little more detail on the problems. And I would like to acknowledge the team that we've assembled here. Mr. Sean Mahoney is our Ensign representative, also representing the Small Business Office that has provided the innovation fund to enable these challenges. Chris Levitt of Ensign is here, who will walk you through the website and submission process. Bob Lee, of course, you heard him speak just a while ago from Wright Brothers Institute, who is supporting the logistics of this challenge. Dr. Jill McQuaid, who is the program manager for the biotech portfolio, and Dr. Oscar Ruiz, the author on this challenge. As I mentioned, this is the second challenge. Next month, we'll be releasing the third and final challenge that's related to the microbiome. With that, over to you, Bob.
Okay, welcome everybody. I want to go ahead and share the screen to give you an idea of what it is that we're going to be looking at here. So this is, like, as Dr. Naik said, this is the second of the challenges that we have out there. You can still see the first challenge out at the same site. We're just naming them Challenge 1, Challenge 2, Challenge 3, so you should be able to find them very quickly. I'm going to this is the agenda that we're working on. Dr. Naik did the intro to the challenges. I'm going to switch over to Dr. Ruiz to give you an overview of that, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on, how the Wright Brothers Institute helps out in these 10 challenges. And then Chris is going to give you a little bit of a lowdown on what the website is, how to put your submissions in and things, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Before I go on, I'd like to actually have people, we're going to try to keep the panel members, because this is being recorded, so we want the panel members to keep their cameras on, but mute the mic when they're not talking. Participants should use the chat to ask questions, and then we'll collect all of those questions and then start to answer them at the end. So you can ask your questions at any time. We ask you to just keep your camera off and the mic muted, just so that we don't have any feedback things. And I want to let you know that we are recording this presentation, and we will post it up on the website so that you can have access to it later. And questions can be submitted after the presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Ruiz.
Good morning, everyone, biotech community. Thanks for joining us this morning. I hope everyone had the opportunity to download the challenge description, the full description, which you can find in the website. I'm gonna go over some of that today. And then, of course, if you have specific questions, you can send it through the chat and we can discuss it. So as Dr. Naik mentioned, our goal is to show that biotechnology is a real tool that can provide valuable products, in this case for an Air Force need. This is the second challenge, is on advanced fuels. And that's what we want to achieve, are fuels with better properties, some specific properties that we would like to have. We believe that biotechnology and synthetic biology might be a great tool that can really bring us closer to that type of capability. And that's what the challenge tries to achieve. Furthermore, the challenge is looking to leverage everything that the big biotechnology community, government, industry, academia have achieved over many years previously, and harness that within this challenge. The challenge itself is pretty broad in the sense of tools that you can use to develop these advanced fuels. For example, it can be a synthetically modified organism that produce some type of biomolecule or a hydrocarbon, or it can be something like the use of a biocatalyst or a joint combination of these processes. As well, it can be just a biofeedstock that is converted through some biocatalytic or catalytic process into the actual hydrocarbon fuels, as long as you achieve the metrics in the challenge. So we have some pretty high goals for this challenge. We want a fuel that will have two main properties. We know in the literature and other places, a lot has been done developing high density fuels using biomolecules and converting those into hydrocarbons, or actually producing hydrocarbons through biological processes for that. But we would like to also have a second property in that fuel, that is thermostability. So high energy density plus thermostability of the fuel, both properties in a single type of fuel. And we would like to compare that to two of the main benchmark fuels that are available for thermostability and for energy density. And those are described in the challenge. Having said that, we know that goal is pretty difficult. We want to strive to get to that point, or as close as possible to those metrics of thermostability and also high energy density. As well, any fuel should comply with other fuel properties. We're talking about freeze point, we're talking about viscosity and so on, just the normal properties in fuels. The timeline is 1 year, so it's pretty aggressive. So hopefully some of you might be able to bring molecules that you have experimented, that you have characterized to some extent, and that you can leverage to bring into and further characterize through this challenge and make it into a deliverable fuel. Besides that, we provide some notional molecules in the challenge. Those are notional, doesn't mean you have to go with those, doesn't mean those address the specific challenge. They are there to provide maybe a starting point for ideas in this regard. If we go to the tasks within the challenge, to discuss those briefly. The first task, let me put it up here for real quick. So the first task asks you to look into molecules that can satisfy high energy density biomolecules that can satisfy high energy density and biomolecules that might be amenable to develop a fuel with improved thermostability properties. Task one, it's basically computational modeling, literature-based, and previous data that you have or new data that you might be able to generate. That's the purpose of task one. So which molecules you can provide and present that will potentially meet some of these characteristics. In task two, you basically gonna try to establish a fuel formulation, which is, it can be a single molecule, it can be multiple biomolecules, it can be a biomolecule combined with a solvent or a conventional or an alternative fuel. And basically you're gonna have to show some of those properties, test some of those properties and provide some characterization, which you can achieve, in this case for task two, with surrogate molecules, if you have not been able to produce the stacked biomolecule yet. Task three is where you start to present your biosynthetic approach, and the word biosynthetic is really important. So this is a biotechnology challenge. So your approach have to incorporate a big component or a principal component of biosynthesis. So either you produce a molecule, a biomolecule, or you use a biocatalytic process to produce then the right hydrocarbons, or a combination thereof. So that's what we are looking for in task three, is that you detail that biosynthetic approach and you achieve the biosynthetic approach. For example, if it's a genetically engineered organism, you need to describe it, you need to prove the properties of this organism and that the organism is producing the right biomolecules. Task four is where you will actually present and test the properties of this fuel. And you'll provide that data to us, those specification properties, specifically on the thermostability and high energy density characteristics of the fuel, along with other characteristics such as freeze point, viscosity, and so on. This task also asks for the performer to provide certain amount of fuel to the Air Force for characterization, for testing some of those properties in our labs. And finally, task five is the final deliverable, where it has a couple areas that need to be achieved. One, we would like to have at least 4 liters of the fuel delivered to the Air Force. That's very important, so we can characterize it further. As well, we would like to have a scheme designed, probably with a cost projection for a production of 10,000 to 100,000 gallons. That doesn't mean you will be producing that. It's just the scheme and how can that be accomplished and what will be required in that area. And finally, a full report of specification properties for the fuel and all the characterization test data and so on. Bob, I think that's all I have for now, and I'll be happy to answer any specific questions later.
Okay, thanks, Oscar. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen with you here to show kind of where we are in the process. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a background. So if you're confused about what's the role of WBI versus the role of the Air Force Research Lab, in order to set up this kind of an arrangement, the Air Force can't do this directly, so they have to work through an intermediary. And we work under a partnership intermediary with the Air Force Research Lab. So they set us up so that we can actually do kinds of things like open innovation challenges like this. What that does for us is that it helps us to speed up the whole process, allows you as a contractor to be able to provide information in an efficient way so that we can actually get a connection and everybody comes in with the right kind of information. So if you'll notice, the emails have been gone out for me for solicitation, and what we're going to be asking for is a white paper submission. The whole process is that you're going to provide a white paper submission, and that white papers will be judged by the panel that you're seeing out here today, and a few others from the Air Force Research Lab, and they are going to select the top 10 or 5 to 10 ideas that come in about how to go about this. Then from that white paper submission, you'll have 2 weeks. You'll be notified about your submission that you were selected. You'll have 2 weeks to prepare a pitch. And that pitch will then schedule through one-on-one meetings with the panel where you can ask them questions and they're going to ask you questions, and you can share proprietary information with that. The white paper submission should not have any proprietary information into it, but just a submission about the rationale of how you're going to accomplish it and how you're going to be able to meet those basic goals. We're trying to do this so that you don't have to have a lot of effort into big paper submissions, a lot of the details there until you win. And then if you win, that's when the work starts, okay? So it's going to come in with this. Another point I forgot to ask is that the company then can submit more than one white paper if you want to have. If you have multiple approaches that you think might work, then you can submit several white papers. There's no limit on that. We're going to be selecting the best approaches that we can, and you will ultimately have to team up with some manufacturer, at least to meet the final capability, which is to produce that 4 liters for the goal with a report that's going to say how you would actually scale this up into a production type of capability. The award process goes like this. You're going to, as soon as you get done with your pitch day, and if you're selected on the as the final pitch by the government evaluation team, WBI will set up a contract with you for the full $1 million, and you can invoice right off the bat for 25% of the purchase order on receipt of you presenting to the government this government purpose rights agreement. Okay, the team will then do the first couple of tasks and get back to the quarter or back to AFRL describing how they're going to do this and the benefits of describe the biosynthetic approach, essentially about following up through task 3. When you complete that task 3, you'll be given another quarter of the prize money to create a 500 milliliter sample. That sample will be tested by the Air Force Research Laboratory. If it kind of meets the properties that you want, then you'll be given another quarter of the prize to scale up and get 4 liters of the biofuel. And then at the end, at that point, you will have to final invoice for the final quarter will be on submission of the final report that describes the scale-up processing for manufacturing. So what we're trying to do is actually provide you money up front so that you don't have to front it out of your IRAD in order to win. The intellectual property, the government purpose rights is basically the whole purpose of this challenge is to demonstrate the feasibility of this synthetic process so the Air Force can improve their operations. it's one thing to build something in a lab, but can you scale it up? Can we ultimately get to the point where we can start using these things? So this idea here of government purpose rights is only from the standpoint of we assume that we're going to be successful. So, and we actually would love to, I think there's a lot of people that are interested if we can achieve these goals. The reason we have the report to scale up is because that may reward or come into a reward of a follow-on contract to actually start figuring out how to produce this kind of capability. Basically, you'll have to show that how it could be manufactured, but it's also going to have to be manufactured through a US company at this point. The government purpose rights are here. If you take a look at them, the government really wants you to become the ultimate producer of this product. But if for some reason your company folds or things, the government purpose rights are there so that the government can go on and actually produce this thing. But you have all rights to do this for commercial purposes. So I'm sure the Boeings of the world would really love to find a more energetic fuel. You think about the fuel savings there. So I think that there's a lot of potential for this type of product out there. With that, I'm going to open it up to Chris Levitt, who is actually going to show you the website that you guys have registered on and talk to you about how the submission process will go. Okay, Chris?
Yep, absolutely. So everyone, I'm going to share my screen and show you how this all works. I know a lot of you have already found your way to the website. This will just be a brief overview for those of you who haven't seen it. So when you navigate to the website, you'll go to innovatedefense.net/AFRL-challenge-2. When you're not registered or logged in, you'll see this page. So what this is a way in which you can create an account. As you see on the very bottom of the page, this challenge is limited to US citizens. You will be contacted and required to provide proof of citizenship to participate. So upon creating an account, that will generate an email to me as well as Bob and a few others. And at that point, we will reach out to you and ask for that proof so we can validate whether or not you can participate in the challenge. Once you are allowed in, you've created your account, you can sign in and you will see this page. So this is this is the challenge here. So at the very top, as you see, we have a couple of links here. This was the registration for this event. Obviously, this will be changed out shortly. We also have a challenge information page and then just kind of a welcome letter as well. Down below, this is where you'll actually go ahead and post your submission. If you click this, you'll see kind of a how-to in terms of what you should post, but it's a very simple submission process. Click Add Submission. You'll add a title, add your details. In this case, my recommendation would be that you put just a brief overview of your concept here, and then you can actually upload an attachment that would contain your full white paper. If you'd like, you can add images and then simply agree to the terms and conditions. This is just our website's terms and conditions, basically pretty typical EULA. You can feel free to read that if you'd like, but nothing bad in there for sure. Once you submit, you'll be taken back to the previous page and you can see your submission. If you need to edit it, you can do so. As a note, this whole website is intended for open innovation. So what that means is that anyone on here can view anyone else's submission. So my recommendation would be to share it when you're writing your white paper, when you're sharing your white paper, you should do it as if you are, say, applying for a patent, in that you will tell enough about your concept to be able to kind of get that thumbs up without giving away all of your intellectual property. And if you have further questions about that, you can contact us and we'll discuss it offline. Other than that, on this site, there are some resources. As it stands right now, we only have the payout information here. Once we get this video of this conference at the end, I'll post that up here as well. So you can find that here if you need to refresh your memory about anything. Otherwise, this site is very simple. If you do have any issues, at the very bottom of the page, you'll see a contact us. If you click that, it'll generate an email that will come to me and the rest of my development team, and we'll be able to address whatever issue you're having. So feel free to use that if you need to. Bob, are there any other things you'd like me to point out here?
A second. Yeah, the only thing I would say is, shoot, I just lost it. Is if you have any questions, We're going to post a frequently asked questions part up on the site here. We're also going to, the recording of this whole question and answer session will be posted out there so you can refresh your memory about the whole process in there. And if you have any other questions, you can just go ahead and email me. And really basically the proof of citizenship or the proof of US persons, which includes citizenship or permanent residence, and that includes green card holders. So if you, all you have to do is send an email to me to prove that if you have anybody else that you want to be having on your team. Okay, thanks, Chris. And I think we're going to get ready to open it up to questions and answers at this point. So I see there's a question here from Malik. It says energy density and thermal stability are the two parameters. Is there any interest for thermal stability from the perspective of polymer additives as phase changing materials as part of heat exchanger, not contributing to the fuel energy, but contributing to endothermic fuel as heat exchanger and thermal stabilizer?
So while we will not be discussing specifics, we don't want to discourage any possible alternative as long as they are using a biotech approach. The challenge calls for a fuel and fuel properties. So I'm not saying that doesn't fit into the possibilities, but it needs to, if that's an approach you're looking for, it has to be on the context of using also a fuel that is biosynthesized or that has a biotech component for the fuel. So this question goes beyond the challenge, I think, in itself.
Okay, is there any other questions from anybody out there at this point? Just go ahead and put them into the chat window and we'll try to take them as there. I did, will the testing of the fuel properties require any specialized equipment?
Definitely, each company, academia, or team of company and academia needs to come prepared to provide that information. So they have to test the fuel properties. They should have experts in the fuels arena, in the fuels area, that can help them identify what are the properties that should be provided, along with the testing of the two specific properties that we're trying to achieve here.
Okay, there's a second question out there. It says, would the white papers be visible to everyone else or just the government people? I think Chris explained to you that the white papers are going to be visible out there, and that is specifically there for teaming arrangements. So if you're a company and you're interested in teaming, if somebody has a good idea and you're a company, you can actually make your own arrangements. But that's also one of the reasons why we're doing this in a two-step process. We don't want you to put out any proprietary information out in the white paper. Think about it just as a teaser about how your approach is and what you're going to be doing. The specifics of actually winning the competition will be done through a Zoom call that's going to be exclusively with the top white paper providers and the government panel. But that will be one-on-one, and at that point you can share whatever information you want because it'll be on a secure communication just between you and the government panel. Okay. And then I see another question that says, elaborate on what counts as a U.S. company. Note that most government requirements are for U.S. manufacturing. Determining what counts as a U.S. company is problematic. And I think the answer here is that we really want something that is U.S. manufacturing. I think it's for U.S. manufacturing within the U.S. If you're a company that is outside of the U.S., I think it's going to be, it might actually come up, if the approach is successful, it may end up going into an ITAR restriction. So you have to be able to meet that kind of requirement. Does anybody else have any other comment on that from the panel?
Bob, I might add to, I think there's a comment made on whether we track the origins of the investors. We certainly would do that. We do some, behind the scenes vetting as required on understanding ownership of the company and who controls the company, whether that's a VC group or other subsidiary. Over.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that, we think that this has a military advantage if successful. So therefore, I think if it does, then we'd want to be able to have that go to some U.S. company that's going to actually be able to control that intellectual property. Again, you would own the intellectual property, but the government would have government use rights of it. Okay, there's a question for you, Oscar. It says, how about if a U.S. company uses its own facility that is outside the U.S. for producing just the initial material?
Bob, I think that's still to be defined by you and others. If that meets the requirement of U.S. persons.
Yeah, I mean, the person that's going to actually be running the competition has to be classified as a U.S. person. So, but I think if they can control the production and their processes, it might be possible for initial production just to produce the initial material could probably be done outside the U.S. But I think you're going to ultimately have to figure out in that big paper, if you want to ultimately produce it, it's going to have to be within the U.S. at that point. Okay, I see that there's another question here. Is this opportunity open to academic institutions? And the answer to that is absolutely yes.
Yes, please.
The big thing, though, is that you might have to team with some company at some point to be able to produce the thing or to actually produce the report about how you would actually scale up. Okay, so again, that's up to you to team with anybody that you want to team with, but there's a big opportunity here. Okay, here's a question. Oscar, you love it. It says, you have a logical approach to each task, but what if one has already identified and tested a molecule that can therefore bypass task one? Will applications that bypass one be disadvantaged?
Great, that's a great question. We know 1 year is a very short, hold on. Yeah, we know 1 year is a very short amount of time to achieve something as with a big goal like this one. So that's why I said, you need to leverage what's in your arsenal of information. If you have molecules, if you have approaches that you have vetted, that you have researched, that you think will address the final goal, even if that bypasses some of the task, but basically you are achieving the next task. In my opinion, I guess that will be fine, but there are tasks, for example, task 3, where you have to demonstrate properties and you have to deliver a certain amount of fuel. Those are fixed. And then, of course, the last task 5, deliverables. We don't want to constrain any good solution out there. as long as biotech is and SynBio and biotech in the general sense is a main component of the process. That's important, that biotech is a main component of the process that gets us to the final product.
My take on that question is that if you can already demonstrate that you're part of the way down the road, I would think it'd be an advantage, not a disadvantage. So, but you still have to have proposed approach by which you can get all the way down the path, all of the tasks.
Yes,
Okay.
Bob, I agree with that.
Is there any opportunity for DOE national laboratories to participate? Rajesh, you got a comment on that one? You're on mute there, so.
Yeah, so they can participate, but the question is, there has to be a commercial process on how this will be scaled up, and just not for the task, for the period of the challenge, but beyond that. And that would require you to partner with commercial entities. So you are welcome to, I don't think there's any restriction if a DOE component wants to participate. And we can check into those rules and we can look deeper based on the small business rules. But I don't know that Sean is online, if he can answer that specific question. Over.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, Sean.
Muted. Can you repeat the question?
So the question for you, Sean, is if you had a DOE participant involved in the challenge, are there any small business based on the challenge and the funding, is there any limitation or exclusion for a government agency to participate? Over.
Yeah, what we did for the first challenge is we said that the DoD could partner with someone, and the money had to go to the partner. But we were definitely willing to work with our other DoD brethren. Does that answer the question?
Okay, so I think there's another question out there. It says, to show that the fuel can be manufactured, does the biomanufacturing scale-up have to be done at the same facility as the corporate partner, or could it be done at a U.S. government facility such as the Department of Energy's NREL or ABPDU facilities where scale-up is demonstrated for subsequent transfer to commercial facilities?
I think if a commercial company or academia can partner with the government, and the government is willing to support that, given DOE or any other facility, that will be okay to demonstrate the technologies to produce the fuel. I don't see an issue with that. I think, as it was mentioned before by Sean, the funding goes to the company and not to the government partner in that case.
I think this actually gets to a question about cooperative research and development agreements that companies can have with U.S. Government agencies. So I think, if a company has a CRADA, they can actually use government facilities to actually build something or test something, but that's a CRADA that would be set up between those two. I think in this case here, where I think the person is asking the question, is that ultimately the scale up is going to be demonstrated for subsequent transfer to commercial facilities. And I think that meets the goal of what the intent is here.
Yes.
Okay, so here's another good question. It says, will academic institutions be compelled to provide IP under reasonable terms to companies to enable commercialization? Who wants to take that question? My answer to that is that the ultimate goal is to get to commercialization, and that's why we're encouraging teaming with some company. So if you think about teaming with some company, you can set up some kind of an agreement that if successful, you're going to go this route, and that should be presented at your pitch. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, we should also, this would be a good point to mention that there would be opportunity for follow-up SBIR money for follow-on funding for a promising solution.
I think that there's also going to be other opportunities. There's a lot of interest in the government for this kind of a thing. So again, that's why the whole purpose of that scale-up report is going to be very important, because I think that report will ultimately be farmed around to the interested agencies that are going to be looking at how well it could be done, what it's going to cost, what the scale-up looks like, and what kind of advantages that does with this kind of a fuel. So question is, could a DoD research lab be a sub-awardee? And to be sure about the prior point, universities can't participate, and to be sure, can they be the prime recipient of the award and then sub-award to a company? I think that is kind of the intent, that the university can be a prime and they can sub-award at that point. Again, this is going to be treated as a grant in stages, so that's kind of how there is. And I'm not sure that the government can actually commit to follow-on funding, but I can tell you that there's a lot of interest in it. And so I think, Oscar, can you elaborate on any things about follow-on funding, or what might look like, what kind of mechanism, how would one apply, what magnitude of funding, et cetera?
At this point, I mean, I cannot go into any specifics in that area. Definitely, this is an area of high interest for all of us. So we'll try to look for new opportunities. And for example, Sean mentioned a couple of them, SBIRs and so on. But we'll have to look into those.
Right. Yeah, as Bob said, we can't commit to anything, but for the right solution, there would be a great opportunity for a direct to phase 2, which I believe those are capped at $1.5 million right now. So yeah, definitely. And then there's matching funds, of course, available as well. So yeah. And
I don't want to underemphasize the commercial potential for this. If you can create a much more energetic fuel, basically that translates into lower weight for an airplane. Companies like Boeing, anybody that's airplane manufacturer would be very much interested in the output of that. And one of the things that WBI can do, and especially in this process, is actually help and assist companies with how do we get this kind of results out into the marketplace. So there's other research that we can help provide you with. There's a question in here. It says, are you coordinating with the new DoD Bioindustrial Manufacturing Innovation Institute, which is currently being competed?
So I can answer to that. We are coordinated in terms of the principals are aware of this challenge, and that is on a different timeline as ours, but it is not dependent on the Bioindustrial Manufacturing Institute. This is Air Force driven. There will be opportunities to link up, hopefully with that. If you're so successful with the challenge through that institute or that consortium, there are opportunities to figure out how you could scale up with your industrial partner in that ecosystem. Over.
Again, just a comment about the Air Force is always coming up with all these kind of new kind of situations and opportunities that are going to be there. I think this would actually dovetail fairly nicely with that manufacturing innovation. Again, the goal here is to start giving you a jump start to start figuring out how you would actually produce this thing and manufacture it so that it becomes competitive. I don't see any other questions at this point. So any final last comments by any of the panel members?
Yeah, Bob, I want to say to the community that we know this is a big challenge, that we are asking a lot in terms of potential properties. So don't be shy to propose what your capabilities, what you have in mind. If there's a solution that you envision that will meet the requirements, please go ahead and submit that. A lot of what's in terms of background information in the challenge is just that, background and notional. The tasks have to be met, but the background is notional. So we are not trying to lead you into what molecules to produce, what molecules to test or propose, and also not into what type of approach you use to develop that fuel, as long as it meets the biotechnology requirement and use of biotechnology application. Thanks.
Okay, so we got another question that says, what about the situation where there are highly promising molecules, but the development of biosynthetic routes is still very early stage, say hundreds of milligrams per liter titles, and optimizing this route will likely take much longer than the 1 year of this challenge. Does the future potential outweigh timelines of this challenge?
That's an interesting question. If you see task 1 is looking for that new molecules that maybe we haven't envisioned, they might be in really early stages, but that are very promising. Maybe a way to circumvent that is that the approach targets some near-term molecule plus focuses into the future potential of a more novel molecule within the construct of a more defined or characterized set of molecules that takes you through to certain point in the development of the characteristics of the fuel. And then you integrate later on that molecule or additional funding through different, if it can be found, to further develop later. But having an approach where you use molecules that give you certain characteristics and you achieve certain level, and then you move this molecule along the way, keep characterizing it. But at the end, probably a single molecule that cannot be generated, that is only characterized at the molecular level. If that's all you have, I don't know if that completes the intent of the call. It's certainly something that can be and it will be very nice to have it within a bigger construct of the fuel.
I would want to point out again, one of the interesting things about the construct of this whole challenge is that we've got it actually in 4 phases. So even if this is promising and you don't know if you can make that at the end, if it looks promising and the team selects you, because they're going to try to weigh off this kind of novelness versus kind of a real safer approach. The idea is that you could blend these things later, or you might be able to win part of the challenge And if you can't deliver on the 4 leaders, so to speak, then you would just forfeit that last part of that challenge. So I think that that's part of the reason why this is a challenge. You know, there may be some risk in it, but I would still encourage you to submit the white paper and let the team judge what they're going to get at it. Okay, I'm going to give anybody else one last chance for any other questions that come in. Again, reminding you that you can always submit a question to me privately, and I will bring it to the team, but any private question that comes up will then be posted on the challenge website for everybody else to see the answer to the questions. So we're going to try to post these out there for everybody at this point. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I would probably think we can go ahead and sign off. All right. Dr. Rajesh, I thank you very much, and we will be contacting you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Jill, I see that you're back on here. I am going to go ahead and get this chat out to you guys and to Chris, and then I will see if we can go ahead and start processing the video. Okay?
Okay.
So,
Yep, I took notes and I'll get that out to everyone as well.